Hey there, Ben here from the What Do They Do podcast. Dean can't be with us at the moment, but we're going to be back for I'm calling it season 3, but it's just we've both been really busy. But we lined up a whole load of new guests, and I've been speaking to a load of interesting people. Done a few interviews that are ready to go, got a few more coming up, and wanted to obviously let you know that we're back, and you can check it out via all your favourite podcast platforms. And we're now also on YouTube.
Have you ever met someone and thought their job sounded cool? Or perhaps you're wondering how you can get to a position that doesn't seem to match any of the qualifications you have at the moment? Well, if so, this podcast is for you.
We found some people with jobs that you might not necessarily know about or expect people to have, and we're going to ask them about how they got there.
Welcome to What Do They Do, a podcast about jobs and how people got them.
If you're listening to this in the audio version, I'm gesticulating and telling you that I'm in front of a camera. So we've got a YouTube channel that we're also going to be posting on, and we've actually got visuals. So you can watch the people talking as well as hearing them if you've got the facility to do that. So pretty excited about that change. I wanted to let you know what's coming up. So we've got new episodes coming out, or if you're watching this like in a few weeks' time, they're already out there. We've got some really interesting people that we've been asking what they do and how they got there. So Brittni, for example, workshop facilitator and event host, also dabbles in comedy, doing some stand-up stuff from where she's based in Berlin. Spoke to her back in January about her journey towards finding the one thing. And that's where she's just got to. So we managed to speak to her at a really interesting point in her kind of life and career where she was just trying to pin down the one thing. She'd moved from her work at AJ and Smart, where she'd helped them transition from being a UX agency to really owning the design sprint. And since she's gone freelance, she's been trying to find that niche for her. And we talked a lot about that, my struggles with social media, but other things as well. So really interesting conversation with Brittni.
So I recently read this book called The One Thing, because this book really sort of changed the game for me. And I realized that what I needed to do was really identify what my one thing is, and then make sure that all the things that I'm doing are sort of revolving around it. So I realized that my one thing really is kind of hosting and gathering. So that's sort of what, now all of the things that I do professionally are revolving around that. So, workshops, very much about gathering, very much about hosting. Facilitation, obviously, designing a workshop is about how can we make sure that this is, an effective use of our time, that we're bringing the right people together, that we're tackling a challenge that's worth our time and all that stuff. Facilitation, obviously, same thing. And then event host is something that I always did because people would sort of would ask me to do it, and I love doing it, but I never really promoted myself as that.
Also then spoke to Lily. Lily's the CEO and founder of Jack Fertility. So female CEO of a male fertility startup. Really interesting juxtaposition there if you're as biased and kind of as me, but we really got into all the details about not just her work with Jack Fertility, but the various roles she's had and how she goes deep to find out what she doesn't want to do, which is a really interesting aspect for those of you on career journeys where you're thinking you might need to change. Lily presented a really interesting approach to her positive pessimist and her deep research about things that she gets involved in.
Me, and that is one of my strengths that I bring to teams and I bring to staff, is that I think part of it is just stubbornness. I refuse to be sort of put into a bad mood or to see things as impossible, which I'm sure can get a bit annoying as well. But it's just, that's who I am, and I've made my peace with it.
Well, that's the bit as well. I was like, and also in terms, you talk about team, there's what you bring, and then sort of the complementary skills of other people. Feeling like I might need to call you a positive pessimist. So
yeah, oh my gosh, I love that.
Maybe
that's perfect.
That might end up being the title on this Couple just to get you started. We also spoke to Jing. So Jing is based in the Netherlands. She has a feminist approach to the design sprint. And that was really interesting to her about how she's starting to weave her activism and approach design with a feminist lens. You can hear more about that from Jing, but really interesting how a lot of design is designed based on the data. If you read Caroline Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women, there's a lot of detail in there. And we discussed that and other things as well.
So, and then I went like, okay, so, and then also my business coach at the time goes like, I have no idea who you work for. I mean, you talk about inclusion and stuff, that's all fine and it's all admirable, but who are you going to work for? Who are your clients? And I go like, oh. So I narrowed it even down, and I looked at also at the volunteer work that I was already doing and the groups that I was doing in the evenings, which were like powerhouse lady groups. And I went like, oh, and that book about invisible women was for me such an eye-opener. I go like, because talks about data that women are missing in all the data sets. But as a designer, I looked at it with a designer lens and I go like, these are all design questions. These were all design decisions. If you're talking about policy, if you're talking about safety, if you're talking about health, it's not all women stuff, as in menstruating, ovulating, and pregnancy. It goes beyond that. So it was really that was a match on top of the dried Kindle that was already there for me to go like, okay, what if my design sprint knowledge and my design thinking knowledge, what if I purposely will add a women-centric lens on top of the human-centric one? What happens then?
In addition to Brittni, Lily and Jing, also had a conversation with Linda. Linda's based in Boston. She runs a branding agency, but there's a real specific focus that they have on branding for independent restaurants, eateries, any of those kind of pop-up vans you'll see. So really focused a niche piece of work in the branding world. And it was really interesting to speak to her about that decision to go quite specific with the work she was doing. I also reflected on my own niche related challenges as a independent business. So there's a few kind of things there around whatever your career progression, if you're going independent, like Brittni, Jing and Linda, but then equally that startup journey and that route through medicine and law that Lily took. There's loads in there exploring what they do and how they got there as well.
Originally, I actually used to be a generalist before I started to niche down. And I worked a lot. Personally speaking, I actually was working a full-time job in marketing and advertisement. And in that journey and career, I found that we were working on some projects that were around small businesses. And I felt this deeper connection to local businesses in a way that I never felt with something like a bigger corporate project. And so I found myself in between this moment where I was like, wow, I'm creating all this amazing work with an incredible team on dream projects I would never dream of working on.
And I also got the chance to speak to Loell. Loell's come through a background of project management, overcoming all sorts of obstacles in order to now start her own business, Art of Teams, where she focuses on supporting teams to overcome big challenges. And that's through workshop facilitation as well as her expertise around project management as well. And what struck me about my conversation with Loell is how, despite maybe perceiving that she might not be capable or other people might not perceive her as capable, she kept on going and kept on proving herself and others wrong along the way. So really interesting story and hopefully a bit of inspiration for those of you that maybe sometimes think that a certain route is not for you. Well, have a listen to Loell and see how you feel after that.
We go back to the emotion of not being able to tie your shoelaces and how impossible that felt. Everything feels impossible when you don't know the next step. And that made me realize that in life, everything is like that. You don't know the next step. And so it feels like there is no way that can happen. So how I look at failure now is I just don't know the next step. And all I need to do is get to that next step. And looking back at times when I had failed before and tapping into those emotions, it reminds me that, hey, this time is the same as when I couldn't tie my shoelaces.
Got a few more interviews to do, so I'm speaking to you in May. A lot of the interviews I did were back in January, February and March of 2023, and I've still got a few lined up that are going to be coming out over the summer. So if that's of interest, we've got Dan. Dan is based in the UK. He has a creative agency that he runs. He's the director at that. We're talking to him probably about being in events around COVID and then coming out of that and kind of the work of these huge events that they put on. It's really interesting work, and I'll be interested to speak to him about kind of the routes into his industry. So if you're interested in the creative kind of events industry, that'll be one you might want to have a look out for. I'm going to be speaking to Claire. Claire used to work at Sky. She's now freelance, and what I'm really interested about her conversation is she has been taking approaches around her mental health and well-being, her wellness, and it's not something we've specifically got into around what people do. And I think it's a really important aspect. So really interested to talk to Claire about that part of surrounding what you do with keeping yourself healthy in both mind and body. And then also one we've got lined up is with Drew. Drew's based in Canada, and he works for a tech company called Braindate. Travels around the world doing events, because Braindate kind of pairs up people at events where you can kind of have impromptu, I don't know, I'll let Drew explain it, but I kind of like professional speed dating, I'm going to call it. But we'll get into whether that's valid or not when I speak to him. But he has also got a background in creative industries like dance. He's a dancer, and I'd be really interested to talk to him about that process of, if you really want to do something that's creative, but quite like a challenging industry to get into, how you balance that up with the other work he does. And yeah, some really interesting topics to come, I hope. So that's who we've got coming. But if you have listened to any of the episodes and you know someone, or you have a job role which isn't really the run-of-the-mill type of job role, a variety of things that you do, we'd really love to speak to you or the people that you know as well. Because I think so far, Dean and I have spoken to people that are generally within our sphere, and I think it's about time we also got out and heard from many other people as well. So where are the people working from their van traveling around Europe? Where are the people who do a job that no one's ever heard of? Where are the people that climb up and fix the kind of electricity pylons? So we'd love to hear from more people and find out what they do and how they got there. So any particular job roles that you're interested in, do reach out and let us know. Put a comment, depending on what you're watching or listening to this through, and we'll try and reach out to people who do those things and you'd like to find out how they got there.